All right, so picture this. So you just got off an email exchange or a phone call with a client. You're stoked about the project, stoked about the client, stoked about the direction that you are going. But then you get hit with the most dreaded question that any content creator will ever get. How much will this project cost? So you pause for a second because you have no idea what to charge because no one ever talks about how much they should charge. So what do when you don't know what to do? You go to Google, you type it in, you look at 15 blog posts, you watch 10 YouTube videos, and you realize exactly what you feared, that every single one of those pieces of content is just as generic as you were hoping it wasn't. No one gives you a specific answer. You still are just as confused, if not more confused, about how much you should charge this client. And guess what? They're expecting an answer. They say things like charge your worth, or charge whatever the client wants to pay, or how much do you think you need to make in order to hit your revenue goal? That's the kind of stuff that people are telling you to do, and that's not how you should charge yourself. Well, you're in the right place because today we debunk how to price your content. So my name is Nash. I'm a professional brand and resort travel photographer, and I know exactly what it's like to have no idea what to charge. Now, I've worked with some of the top brands in the world. I've also talked to some of the top content creators in the world, and as a result, I've compiled what I believe to be the ultimate content creator cheat sheet for pricing. And I've also created a calculator where you can actually plug in exactly what I'm talking about today in this video and get basically a price that you should charge almost instantaneously. To be honest, I probably should charge a lot for the content that I'm putting in this video right now because it has the potential to make you a ton of money, but I'm not going to charge you. All I ask is that you give it a like if you get any ounce of value out of this video, and that you also subscribe if you're into content creator business tips. So believe it or not, there's actually no right answer in terms of how you should charge your clients, but I believe that there is one answer that is more right than the other answers. And I know that because I've charged all three of these different pricing structures. As far as I can tell, there are three pricing structures. Now there may be more, I'm not sure, but I've charged clients in three different ways. Now I've charged clients anywhere from $50 for an entire project all the way up to $50,000 for a project. And the weird part is the project I did for $50,000 was not significantly more work than the one I did for $50. It was maybe 4 times, 5 times as much work, but it wasn't 1,000 times more work, but I got paid 1,000 times the amount. And the reason why is because I implemented a certain pricing structure and a certain pricing strategy that I'm going to be talking about right now. So although the amount of work was not significantly different, the structure that I used to pitch the client was significantly different, and that's what made all the difference in terms of what I got paid. Without any further ado, let's jump into what the 3 pricing structures are for content creation. The first structure is time-based. So this is things like day rates or hourly rates. And these are kind of like the most basic level that most people will start out when they start their content creation career. These are things like I charge $50 an hour or I charge $1,500 a day. And the good part about this is it's very easy to charge. You can just tell the client, hey, I charge $1,500 a day. It's going to take us a day to shoot. Great. It costs you $1,500 to get the end product. So it's good for you to be able to easily charge something, but it's also good for the client because they understand, okay, that's how much it charges and that's how much it's going to cost to get the end product. So I know most of you probably came to this video because you want specific numbers. So I'm going to drop a table that you guys can take a look at. You can screenshot it if you want to. That kind of gives you ballpark numbers in terms of your skill level of what I would charge based on your day rate or your hourly rate. So just to kind of clarify, a beginner in this circumstance would be somebody who either hasn't shot anything up to maybe shooting about 3 projects, whereas somebody who's expert or advanced would be somebody who's maybe done like 20 to 25 projects in this certain genre. So as you'll see, these are just basic benchmarks that I see in the industry that I charge myself or that I've seen other peers charge for this type of work. However, it doesn't take into account your own personal expenses like your rent, your software costs, what your gear cost is, studio cost if you have that, all that kind of stuff. So just this as needed, but these are just kind of like basic benchmark numbers that I've seen work for me as well as some of my friends in the industry. So now that you know the pros, which is basically that it's very easy to charge for, let me talk about some of the cons of charging an hourly or a day rate. The first one being that when you charge this, it's very dependent on the amount of work that you do. So when you estimate a cost, it might not actually be the same cost that it ends up being in the end. So for example, if you do a project that you estimate will take 10 hours, but it actually takes you 15 hours, instead of the client paying $1,000, now they're paying $1,500 for the same project, and they might be a little upset by that overcharge. Another con is that you only get paid for the amount of time that it takes you to do the job. So you're not really incentivized to do things faster or more efficiently because you get paid more depending on how long it takes you. So it's kind of like a union job kind of thing, which is not great for the client in terms of being able to get the maximum amount out of their money. money. That being said, you're also not really charging based on the value of the end product. You're basing your value on your time. So it's very hard to justify to a client like, hey, I need 5 more hours and it's going to cost you another $500 when they can't actually see the value that that extra $500 is bringing to the end product. And the last part is that it's not scalable because, again, you are getting paid for your time. So the only way to make more money is if you spend more time, and because there's only 24 hours in a day, you don't want to get burnt out. It's very difficult to scale unless you're hiring more people and charging more based on either your day rate or your hourly rate. So overall, time-based pricing has its place, but it's not the preferred way of pricing. So let's jump into number 2, the per photo or per content rate. So this is when you get paid either per photo or per video, and you get paid a certain rate depending on how many you produce. So the good part about this is, again, it's pretty easy to estimate how much it's going to cost the client. They're like, hey, we need 10 photos. You're like, cool, I charge $100 a photo. Then they know it's going to cost $1,000, and that's pretty standard. And it doesn't matter how much time it takes you to do. So it's actually good for you because you could be more efficient, create more content, and use less of your time so you can get more jobs. It's also pretty easy for the client to understand, because if you say, hey, 10 photos, $100 a photo, then the client will be like, cool, then it costs $1,000. That's what it costs. I don't have to worry about you having to work overtime, having to pay you extra, all that kind of stuff. Is just basically a flat rate per content. So I'm going to drop another chart that you can screenshot if you'd like for basic benchmarks for what I would charge on a per photo or per video rate. Photos are a lot easier to charge on a per photo rate than videos are, in my opinion, just because there's so many moving parts for videos and it's so dependent on all kinds of different factors. Video just in general is more expensive to price and harder to price, but these are just general benchmarks that you can start using as a baseline to start charging clients. The last thing is when you're charging per content, it's a little bit easier for you to charge things like licensing fees or usage or exclusivity, because you would be charging that on a per content basis. Whereas if you're charging something like a day rate, you might be able to give them unlimited amount of photos. You know, if you shoot for a day, they might be expecting 400 photos, and it's a little harder to dictate how much it is per photo and then also what the licensing fee would be for that. Not saying it's impossible, but it's a little bit easier when you charge per piece of content. And this is also a slightly more professional way of doing things because it's based more so on the project versus just specifically on your time. So now that we know the pros of the per content pricing structure, let's talk about some of the cons. So one of the major cons that I see, which could be transitioned into a pro if you do it right, is that a lot of clients won't actually know what deliverables they want when they come to you. They just know, hey, we need some photos. I don't really know how many, maybe 10, maybe 20. I have no idea. So what you really have to do is you have to narrow down, okay, what's your goal here and how many photos do we actually need, or how many videos do we actually need, or how long is this video actually going to be, and try to get a number as close as possible. But a lot of times clients will be like, you know, maybe we need like 10 to 15. So you're expecting, say you charge $100 a photo, that you're going to be making between $1,000 to $1,500 on this job. So you go out and you spend the extra time to take these 15 photos, maybe you even over deliver and do 20 so they can kind of narrow down and pick that 10 to 15 that they want. Well, then they come back to you and they're like, well, actually we only like these 3. We only need 3, forget about the rest. So then you only make $300 instead of what you expected to be $1,000 to $1,500, right? At least. So how you prevent this is you can actually say, hey, you know, this is kind of the range that we're looking at. If I do this work, you have to buy a minimum of 10 photos. And maybe I deliver this stuff and you're not super stoked about the photos. We have to do a reshoot, whatever, that's fine. But you are obligated by this contract to buy a minimum of, say, 10 photos so that it's worth my time. Now, kind of building off that idea, another con is that when you do per photo, it doesn't really account for unexpected expenses. So as an example, maybe you have to hire extra talent, or you have to pay for a permit for something that you weren't expecting, or just like any kind of unexpected expense that comes in and increases your production expense. You can't then go and say, oh, actually, JK, instead of $100 a photo, it's $150 a photo. Sorry, I hope that works for you. It's really unprofessional to do that. So that's one of the cons of the per content basis. Just something to keep in mind is you want to be able to give as accurate of an estimate of what that photo is going to cost to them so that you can actually make a profit and not go into loss on it. So overall, if I were to pick between the day rate or the time-based versus the per content rate, I would 100% choose the per content rate because I can work faster, more efficiently, and also book more jobs in the same amount of time. And I'm actually incentivized to do a better and faster job because if I do a better job, maybe they'll buy more photos, I can sell more licensing, and it just incentivizes me to do a better job overall. So that brings me to the last and the final number 3 of the pricing structures, which is actually my favorite, and it is called value-based pricing. So basically how value-based pricing works is you figure out what the value of your content is to the brand. For example, if you think it's going to generate $100,000 worth of sales, then what would the value of that content be for the brand to pay? So would they pay $10,000 to make $100,000? Yeah, they probably would. And then that's how you charge it. Before I go into the pros of this, because the pros are kind of obvious, I'm going to kind of talk about some of the cons, which the first one being it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint what that value is, and by extension, also convince the client that the value that you're saying it's worth is actually worth it to the client. And that comes down to sales skills, negotiation skills, and I could do a video about that if you guys want to see it, but just keep in mind that it's a little bit harder to convince the client that the value you're saying is worth is actually what the value tangibly is. So because it's hard to determine and nail down what the actual tangible dollar value is of your content, it also makes it a little bit harder to pitch because clients don't understand that a lot. They're usually used to like per content or day rates, and usually they'll try to steer you in that direction. So it takes some negotiation skills to actually be able to negotiate a deal like this. And the last reason is it can be risky. For example, if you say that this content has the potential to make you $100,000, you should charge $10,000 for it. That's a 10x ROI. That's great. But what happens if it doesn't make $100,000? It's a little risky on your part, and you could put yourself in some hot water if you aren't almost 100% certain that you can actually achieve the result that the client wants. So all those negatives to say, value-based pricing, or some people call this project-based pricing, is 100% the best way to go. Now, I'll give you a few main things to consider when you are thinking about doing this sort of pricing structure. Number one, and in my opinion, most importantly, is the value you get paid is in direct proportion to the amount of value you're giving the company. So a lot of these value-based pricing structures are deal structures based on performance. So performance is the better an ad does, the more revenue it generates, the more revenue you get personally as the production company or as the agency or as the content creator in general. So just as a basic example, say a client is currently running an ad generating $50,000 in sales. You come to them and say, hey, I will work for free for you, or I'll work for a very nominal price. And if we make more than $50,000 worth of sales off of your same ad spend, we just switch out the creative. Anything above that $50,000, I want 25% of. So at that point, it's pretty much a no-brainer for the company because they're not really paying much up front for you to create content, but anything above that current benchmark that they're currently making is pure profit for them, and you are also getting a percentage of that. So it's basically no loss for them and only upside for you. The downside of it, again, for you is like if you don't actually hit that above the $50,000 in this example, then you're basically working for free. But assuming that you have the skills and you've done the research, then you should be confident in your skills to be able to produce that result for the client. So that being said, another pro is as the brand scales, so do you, because you only create that content one time, and then the client can go and run that ad for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever the license might be, and you can continue making 25% above whatever the $50,000 is every single month without you having to continue creating more content for them. Again, this is value-based pricing because you are bringing more value to the client, so therefore you get paid more value. Instead of only getting paid once or your day rate, or only getting paid once for the content, you're getting paid recurringly, and it scales as the brand scales. And the last thing that's really great about value-based pricing is not only can we charge performance fees, but we can also charge something called a license. So just the definition of license, basically a client does not have the ability to use your photo for anything unless you give them permission for it. So a license just gives them permission to use your content in certain aspects. So it might be social media, it might be paid ads, it might be on a billboard, it might be TV, whatever it is, that's what you give a license for. So when you charge based on value, you can actually charge licensing fees depending on the size of the company, what they're using it for, and how long they want to use it for. So if you got a ton of value out of this video so far, I want to show you how to take that pricing structure that I just showed you and make it super simple so you can take like 10 seconds, plug in some numbers, and you'll basically have a number spit out for you of exactly what you should charge a client, or at least a ballpark idea. So it's a calculator that I developed specifically for commercial content creators, and it factors in things like client size, client revenue, client marketing budget, what your revenue goals are, if you need exclusivity, if you're an influencer, what you should charge for your influencer rates, depending on if they want to whitelist it or how big your social following is, all kinds of different things. I basically thought of every situation, and all you have to do is plug in a few numbers and you are good to go. So if you're interested in that calculator, you can check it out in the description below. I have a link to it that you can check it out for yourself. Also, if you're interested in taking your content creation passion from a hobby to an actual thriving six-figure business, and you'd like to talk with me about how to do that, then I'd love to chat with you. You can check out the link in the description below to schedule a call with me, and I'd have a mentorship program that specifically helps creators go from hobby to six-figure business, and we have a full step-by-step program that goes through it. And no, it's not a course, it's actually a mentorship program with myself where we'll be able to figure out exactly what is wrong with your business, troubleshoot that, go through all the process and steps, and be able to come out the other side with an actual business instead of just a side hobby that's kind of fun. And the kicker with it is you actually don't even need a social media following at all. You could have 0 Instagram and it totally works. So if that's interesting to you, check out the link in the description below and schedule a call with me, and I'd love to chat with you. So that's about it for this video. If you got any ounce of value, I'd love for you to like this video and also subscribe if you like creative business tips, because we're dropping one of these videos every single week. Hit me in the comments with any topics that you would like me to cover. If there's anything that was confusing for you in this video, or any kind of follow-up questions that you want me to cover, I'll be doing videos about that. So if you have anything at all, throw it in the comments below, and I cannot wait to drop the next video. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.